Once considered America's ideal neighbor and its most welcoming market, Canada is now quietly turning away. No protests, no slogans, just simply not choosing to buy anymore. From Walmart and McDonald's to Coca-Cola, brands that once symbolized the American dream are now gradually disappearing from the shopping carts of Canadian consumers. Could this be more than just a branding issue? Is it a sign of a deeper fracture? When the neighbor is no longer silent. The quiet boycott of America is silently reshaping an entire era. There's something many Americans haven't realized. The most painful blows sometimes don't come from angry shouts, but from silence. Steady, determined, and irreversible. And right now, that silence is rising from the north. Canadians, once considered America's most natural expansion market, where U.S. brands entered as if into their own homes, are quietly saying no. Not with banners, not with slogans, but by walking away from the checkout line, putting American products back on the shelves, and choosing something closer, something more genuine, something bearing the maple leaf. This isn't a media crisis. There's no explosive scandal, no viral clip causing public outrage. Everything is unfolding in order, almost calmly, but intensely. It's when Canadian mothers start reading every ingredient more carefully on American milk cartons. When families from Saskatchewan to Nova Scotia begin prioritizing locally produced food, even if it costs a few dollars more. And when a new generation, Gen Z, decides to ask, why must we choose American goods when there are better options for the environment, for people, and for our own country? The numbers are just the tip of the iceberg. Hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue vanishing from American corporations in Canada within a year is no coincidence. It's the result of years of accumulated feeling, being taken for granted. Canadians feel they are no longer treated as strategic partners, but as a dependent market, a place to sell, not to connect. America once exported not just goods, but values, convenience, speed, scalability, qualities that once inspired global admiration. But those values are now being weighed and measured, and Canadian consumers, some of the most informed and ethically driven in the world, are making new choices. They are sending a silent message. If America no longer sees us as friends, don't expect us to keep supporting what it brings. The heartbreaking part is that Americans, both the public and corporations, still don't seem to notice. They continue launching formulaic ad campaigns, pushing outdated discount strategies, as if lower prices alone will still win hearts. But the world has changed, and Canada is the first mirror reflecting that change. Not loudly, but very clearly. This boycott is not just a rejection of products. It's a rejection of dominance, a quiet pushback against the invisible imposition of American corporate culture. When a Canadian homemaker chooses a locally made tomato sauce over Heinz, it's not just about taste. It's a micro-level political decision, a clear sign that trust is no longer present. Trust was something American brands once possessed, by default. But now they must earn it back, bit by bit. And that cannot happen if they keep seeing Canada as a safe market, where every American innovation is automatically embraced as truth. The bigger question now isn't whether this wave will spread to other countries. It absolutely will. The real question is, how will America respond when the very things that built its credibility and appeal, closeness, loyalty, community values, are being traded away for short-term profit? Canada is not just boycotting American products. They are withdrawing the empathy once reserved for their southern neighbor. And that is a loss far greater than any trade agreement can quantify. If silence is their answer, then it's time America learned how to listen. Walmart and the collapse of a giant. When low prices are no longer a comfort. In a country known for its practicality, where most people live in harsh climates and must calculate every penny of their living expenses, no one ever thought that one day Walmart, the ultimate symbol of savings, would become the one being abandoned. But that unthinkable scenario is happening. Not because Walmart sells expensive goods, or because Canadians suddenly change their shopping preferences, but because Walmart itself, as an industrial American model, no longer represents anything Canadians feel attached to. The emptiness lies not only in the shuttered stores, in the dusty shelves, or in the deserted parking lots. It lies in the feeling of being taken for granted. For many small communities in Canada, from Alberta to Newfoundland, Walmart was more than just a supermarket. It used to be a support hub, a place where people shopped after work, where high school kids were sent to get some milk, where the elderly went just to meet others and feel like they were still a part of vibrant life. But when stores started closing one by one, without warning, without any explanation other than restructuring, the people there began to realize a harsh truth. They had never really been part of Walmart's long-term strategy. They were just part of a profit equation. And when the numbers stopped adding up, everything got crossed out. A Walmart store in the suburbs of Calgary once attracted thousands of people each week. But after over 10 years in operation, it was shut down just weeks after a slight revenue decline. No one came to say thank you. No one listened to the community's questions. Where will the workers go now? Where will the elderly buy groceries when the nearest supermarket is 30 kilometers away? The only answer was silence, and that silence marked the first crack between the American brand and the trust of Canadians. There was a time when Walmart's slogan, "Save money, live better," rang out like a declaration for the North American middle class. But now, living well isn't just about saving. It's about being respected, being heard, being part of the economic and social picture you help create. Canadians are now turning to Loblaws, Metro, or even small local convenience stores, not because they're cheaper, but because they're present. It's presence, not promotional pricing, that people value now. A local shopkeeper who greets you by name. An employee who knows what the neighborhood really needs. That's what Walmart, in its algorithm-driven management, has lost. In its drive to expand, it forgot the most fundamental thing. A community is not a market. It's a place where people live together through trust. Today's Canadian youth are no longer fascinated by Walmart the way their parents were. They prioritize sustainable consumption, transparent supply chains, and products from local farms. They're willing to pay more for an organic egg with a traceable origin than to buy something cheaper without knowing how the chicken was raised. And when Walmart can't answer the new questions of this era, it falls into a void no discount can fill. The irony is that while Walmart continues to operate strongly in many U.S. states, it's the neighboring consumers, the ones who once welcomed the brand with open arms, who are the first to walk away. And this isn't just a lesson for Walmart, it's a red flag for the entire American business model. If you treat a community as just a profit checkpoint, then when the profit is gone, so is the community. And once they've walked away, it's incredibly hard to win them back. The real question isn't how much market share Walmart has lost. It's what deeper, more essential thing Walmart has lost: the sense of presence in people's lives. And in a world where consumers increasingly choose based on emotion, awareness, and trust, that's a loss that can't be measured in dollars. The collapse of Walmart in Canada, therefore, isn't just an economic event. It's the clearest expression of a shift in consumer value systems. A warning to all brands: be present, not just with products, but with kindness, patience, and long-term commitment. Because sometimes what brings a mega retailer to its knees isn't a dramatic protest, but a quiet nod of disapproval and footsteps walking away, never to return. When memories become a burden. McDonald's and the end of a childhood dream. If Walmart once symbolized practicality, then McDonald's was the symbol of memory. Of those childhood days running into the store with sparkling eyes, excited for the happy meal and the small toy inside. It was where parents took their kids after school, where first dates began with a box of fries and warm yellow lights. But something is clearly changing in Canada. Memories are no longer enough to hold consumers. And McDonald's, a brand once embodying closeness and joy, is now sliding into decline with a silence that feels cold. It's hard to imagine that McDonald's, one of the largest fast food chains in the world, could be empty even in the bustling centers of Montreal or Toronto. But it's happening. Since mid-2023, revenue has been steadily declining. The long lines at the counter have faded, work shifts are being cut, and even some long-standing stores, once considered a familiar corner for generations, have quietly closed down, leaving behind nothing but a cold "For Lease" sign taped to the window. That is the most frightening thing for a brand, when people are no longer angry, no longer debating, but just quietly walking away. Why? The answer doesn't lie in the menu, nor the prices. It lies in the growing sense of distance between McDonald's and the community it once served. The younger generation in Canada, those who grew up with McFlurries and Chicken McNuggets, are slowly turning away, not because they forgot, but because they understand more. They start asking, what's really inside that burger? Where does the beef come from? Why does a fast meal leave such a long trace on the environment? McDonald's used to define convenience, but in an era where convenience is no longer a big enough reason to choose, the brand is becoming irrelevant. They've replaced people with self-service kiosks. They've downsized staff to optimize costs. They've expanded while forgetting the depth of local culture. And in that overly rational, almost emotionless process, McDonald's lost its most valuable asset, the ability to make people feel at home. A father in Vancouver once shared that he no longer brings his child to McDonald's every weekend, like when he was young. Not because I hate McDonald's, but because it's no longer a beautiful part of my memories. It's just an old habit that doesn't fit anymore. That statement sounds gentle, but hits hard. This brand didn't fail because it offended, but because it became too distant. More than just a restaurant, McDonald's used to be a mirror reflecting the American spirit. Dynamic, cheerful, accessible, and we're part of you. But now, in Canada, a country where people are increasingly focused on health, supply chain transparency, and the social impact of every consumer choice, McDonald's has become a symbol of an era they no longer want to return to. The ending doesn't come as a collapse, but as a slow erosion in collective memory. A great brand doesn't die from scandal, but from losing touch with the present moment. And what's worth pondering is, if this is happening in Canada, a country with a consumer culture closest to the U.S., where McDonald's was once embraced as a global icon, then what awaits the brand in more distant, less patient markets? McDonald's can refresh its menu, speed up digital transformation, launch massive media campaigns. But all of that is meaningless if they don't pause to ask an important question. How do we return to being everyone's place to eat? How do we get chosen not just for convenience, but remembered for warmth? Because when memories fade, nothing can hold on to trust, unless the brand itself chooses to return. Not with past glory, but with new sincerity, with real presence, in every meal served, every conversation had, every customer who walks in, not just to eat quickly, but to rediscover a piece of connection lost between people. And if McDonald's can learn that, perhaps they still have a chance. Not to start over, but to rebuild something once sacred, the feeling of belonging. Kraft Heinz and the breakup at the dinner table. Prow. When trust is no longer a given. There's a simple but painful truth. People don't stop having dinner, but they can stop trusting what used to be icons on the table. And that is what's happening to Kraft Heinz in Canada. A market that once considered Heinz ketchup and Kraft mac and cheese essential parts of everyday meals. But now, those bright red bottles and golden yellow boxes are no longer being reached for instinctively. They are being replaced, not by something flashier, but by choices that seem less American, yet more heartfelt. This change didn't come from a sudden wave. It came from small waves, repeated daily. From moms reading the ingredient list more carefully, to kids bringing homemade lunches instead of sandwiches spread with Kraft mayo. From doctors recommending less sodium, to whispered social media conversations about supporting local brands. Gradually, Kraft Heinz, with all its history, scale, and brand legacy, has become no longer suitable. There was a time when Heinz ketchup's presence at the dinner table was almost a given. A trusted symbol, stable, familiar, unquestioned. But the world has changed. Today's consumers don't just need familiar, they need understanding. They no longer eat out of habit. They eat for value. And when they turn to read the ingredients, they see a long list of hard-to-pronounce additives in a Heinz bottle. When they read the news, they learn that the tomato processing plant in Leamington, once called the tomato capital of Canada, was shut down after Kraft Heinz restructured, putting hundreds of local workers out of jobs. What was broken wasn't just trust in a product, but the invisible bond between consumers and the brand. A consumer may forgive a change in taste, but they will not forgive feeling disrespected or being reduced to a line in a financial report. After the 2015 merger, Kraft Heinz became one of the largest food corporations in the world. But from that moment, they entered a massive operational orbit where decisions were made on Excel spreadsheets in Chicago, and the consequences landed in rural Ontario or Quebec. What once appeared as a friendly brand now bore the image of a cold, distant industrial machine. Canadian consumers feel that distance clearly, and they respond by choosing something else. A smaller ketchup brand, local label, less sugar, produced at an organic farm 80 kilometers away. A cheese box that isn't artificially bright yellow, but free of preservatives. They don't need loud advertisements. They just want to be treated like a friend, not a target household code. Today's young Canadians have all the tools to research, to share, to recommend, and to walk away. No boycott is needed. They simply say, I no longer feel connected to this brand. And for Kraft Heinz, that's enough to send sales into free fall. When an elderly woman in Winnipeg says, I used to buy Kraft dinner every week for my husband, but now my daughter told me to switch to organic. Less salt, no preservatives. So I started paying attention, and I realized it made sense. That's not just a change in consumption. That's a generational shift. From blind trust to conscious choice. Kraft Heinz still has a chance, but that chance doesn't lie in launching a lower sodium version or more eye-catching packaging. It lies in whether they're willing to reconnect with the communities they once belonged to, with real actions, not just words. Reinvesting in local supply chains, being transparent about ingredients, re-engaging in what builds memories, family meals, trust through generations, and the happy tears around the dinner table. Because in the end, a food brand doesn't just feed the stomach, it must nourish memory. And if that memory is betrayed, then no business strategy, no matter how sophisticated, will be more than a cold meal no one wants to name again. Campbell's, when a can of soup no longer opens memories but evokes distance. For many who grew up in North America, the soft pop when opening a can of Campbell's on a cold afternoon wasn't just the sound of food. It was the echo of memory. A simple yet cozy dinner. Hot soup flowing from the spoon into cold hands. That was family. That was safety. That was a quiet fullness in a hectic world. But then, In 2025, right in Canada, a place that once saw Campbell's as a part of winter's rhythm, those cans of soup began quietly staying on the shelves. No one touched them. No one mentioned them. And perhaps that is even more frightening than criticism. A sales decline of over 8% in just 2 years isn't particularly loud, but it is the choked gasp of a consumer habit being replaced by awareness. Campbell's, a more than 150-year-old symbol of North American industrial food, didn't fail because its soup tasted bad. It failed because it no longer made people want to choose it. And in an era where every consumer decision reflects a value system, not being chosen anymore is a heavy sentence for any brand. Canadian consumers today don't simply buy soup because it stores well. They want to know, what are the ingredients? Are there preservatives? Is the company transparent? Where did this soup come from? A cold factory in Pennsylvania? Or an organic farm near British Columbia? And Campbell's, with its large-scale industrial production, its long ingredient lists, its standardized to the point of emotionless flavors, no longer fits those questions. The replacement doesn't come from big rivals, but from smaller brands, local, organic, shared among consumers on social media, accompanied by advice like, "Try this soup, it tastes like Grandma used to make." And so Campbell's, with all its historical glory, is set aside, gently but decisively. No longer the first choice, not even chosen out of habit. Simply, no longer chosen. In a 2024 Canadian consumer survey, when asked why they no longer buy Campbell's, the most common answer was, "It doesn't feel real anymore." That is the starkest verdict for a brand that once lived on emotion. A middle-aged man in Ottawa recalled, "I used to think this soup was part of my childhood memories. But one day, I read the ingredients list and asked myself, what was I really eating back then?" The loss of trust didn't come from one specific wrongdoing. It came from a long series of missed opportunities. Campbell's missed the wave of organic food, missed the chance to connect with a younger generation seeking sustainability, missed all those moments to say to consumers, "We're still here and we understand you." They just kept producing, as if time hadn't changed, as if canned soup was still the savior of every household like it was 50 years ago. But Canada hasn't stood still. People here are changing, calmly but clearly. They're not smashing anything. They're just quietly walking away. And when a new generation steps into the supermarket, faced with rows of choices, they choose the brand that makes them feel seen, respected. Campbell's, unfortunately, has become more of an industrial product than a soulful culinary symbol. The bitter truth is, Campbell's didn't have to be lost. They just needed to change at the right time. A little more truth in the ingredients, a little more closeness with the community, a little more courage to see their legacy not as a past medal, but as an unfulfilled promise to the present. And now, the lesson from Canada isn't a sudden blow. It's a mirror reflecting what could happen anywhere. When a brand refuses to grow with its customers, no matter how beloved it once was, it will gradually become unfamiliar. Soup will still be made. Family dinners will continue. But if Campbell's refuses to cook in the way this era demands, then the pop of a can opening will be nothing more than the sound of a time long gone and never coming back. Coca-Cola and the silent retreat, when a symbol loses its taste in consumers' hearts. Coca-Cola used to be more than just a beverage. It was the vibrant red of summer, the fizz of a can opening under the midday sun, the sparkling sound of a reunion party. Generations of Canadians grew up with the image of a Coca-Cola can as part of every childhood moment, from camping trips in the forests of Ontario to backyard BBQs in Quebec. But that familiarity is no longer an unshakable privilege, and Coca-Cola, a brand that once didn't have to try to be loved, is now facing something it never anticipated: Indifference. Since 2024, Coca-Cola's sales in Canada have dropped nearly 9%, a number that may seem small but is enough to shake the strategy of a giant that has always lived on habit. No more images of Coke cans stacked high in shopping carts. No more bright red banners dominating holiday displays. Young people, the generation once believed to be sugar-addicted, are turning away deliberately. They don't protest, they don't shout. They simply choose something else. A mint-infused drink from a local farm, a bottle of Kraft kombucha, or simply water, poured from a glass jug at home with a few slices of lemon. Modern consumers don't just want less sugar, they want more truth. In an era where people read labels more closely than love texts, every Coca-Cola can isn't just sweetness, it's a question. What does this brand represent? As transparency in nutrition, environmental impact, and business ethics becomes the new standard, Coca-Cola, once the king of convenience, is now seen as a symbol of an outdated era. Canadians aren't rejecting Coca-Cola because they hate America. They're turning away because they feel the brand is no longer for them. A mass-produced drink found on every corner, yet carrying no story that feels personal. No connection to the community. Nothing meaningful beyond the message. Just drink and be happy. But today's happiness isn't measured by carbonation. It's measured by peace of mind. Knowing that what you're drinking isn't harmful. Knowing that the product is not just for consumption, but a responsible choice. And that's exactly where Coca-Cola is falling behind. Not because the flavor is gone, but because the values weren't rebuilt in time. A 70-year-old man in Calgary once shared, "Back in the day, Coke was something I saved up to buy every weekend. It felt like a reward. But now my grandkids don't even touch it. They drink their mom's lemon water or herbal tea. Not because they dislike Coke, but because there's no reason to like it anymore." That statement may sound light, but it reveals something deep. Coca-Cola has lost its reason to be chosen. Campaigns like Zero Sugar, Diet Coke, or Coca-Cola Life, efforts to repaint the brand, haven't managed to hold on to a generation that shifted its value system. No one feels attached to the red and white icon anymore when it only stands for massive corporations chasing profit, promoting a formulaic version of joy. Canada, a land of moderation, of rational yet heartfelt choices, is slowly withdrawing its trust from Coca-Cola, not out of offense or disdain, but because they feel misunderstood. And that is the most painful loss for a brand that once stood for global connection. Perhaps Coca-Cola will still survive, still sell in many places, still appear in stadiums and festivals. But if it doesn't change from the root, doesn't learn to reconnect through genuine action, real listening, and a deeper presence in everyday life, then everything will just be a distant performance for a crowd no longer paying attention. Market share can be regained. Campaigns can be redesigned. But once memories are replaced by a sense of distance, they're very hard to bring back. And if Coca-Cola, the enduring symbol of the taste of America, is being forgotten by its closest neighbor, then the question for America is, how many more things are quietly fading away? Not because they're being opposed, but because they're no longer close enough to be held on to. And in a world where consumers choose more with their hearts than with their wallets, that's a warning no brand dreaming of immortality can afford to ignore, no matter how sweet. When the neighbor stands in silence. The final warning to America from Canada's withdrawal. The decline of Walmart, McDonald's, Kraft Heinz, Campbell's, and Coca-Cola in Canada is not just a series of isolated market events. They are not simply signs of a shifting consumption cycle. In reality, when all these phenomena are connected, we see a bigger picture, more serious, and perhaps more heartbreaking. America is gradually losing something no dollar can buy back: the trust of those who were once the closest. Canada is not a distant market, not a land of a different language or different values. Canada is the neighbor next door, a historic ally, the first customer of many American brands for nearly a century, and also a place that once placed full trust in everything made in USA, not just for quality, but for meaning. But now, as Canadians begin to choose differently, quietly walking away, silently replacing, this is no longer just a matter of a few lines in trade statistics. It is a question of legacy. Each Campbell's soup can not picked, each Kraft dinner box left on the shelf, each Coca-Cola can still untouched in the fridge. All are signs of something slowly dying. Emotional connection. Canadians known for their calm and rationality are not leaving America out of hatred. They are simply refusing to continue believing that American brands, once symbols of civility, community values, and joyful togetherness, still carry that spirit. This is not an anti-American wave. This is a process of detaching from a one-sided relationship. When consumers feel they're just profit tools, when corporations no longer value real presence, they will leave. Quietly, without anger, without slogans, but they will leave. And in that silence lies the loudest warning. America is losing what once made it special: empathy. What once made people love America wasn't just products, it was spirit. The feeling that behind every product was a story, a smile, a hard-working hand, a promise of quality and fairness. But today, when profit is placed above community, when ads replace listening, when giant brands become invisible in the very neighborhoods they once belonged to, that trust fractures too. Canadians are not speaking out with rage. They're speaking with action. They buy local. They choose transparent brands. They follow new ethical standards in consumption: environment, human rights, truth. And the irony is, this isn't limited to their own country. This is the first breeze signaling a larger storm, the storm rising from the new generation of American consumers themselves. When Gen Z and millennials, in both Canada and the US, no longer automatically choose the brands their parents once trusted, the old values are no longer a solid foundation. That's the moment to ask again: what do American brands truly represent now? Global expansion, unlimited profit, or a consumption model cracking from within? Canada's withdrawal from trust to consumer behavior is a test full of warning signs for American society. It forces brands to step back and look inward, not just to adjust business strategies, but to re-examine their very philosophy. What remains when the product is no longer chosen? What remains if the beautiful memories tied to America, the warm soup, the sandwich, the soda can, now only evoke a distant era? Maybe American brands will still exist, still dominate markets in many places. But if they cannot restore empathy, sincerity, and real presence in the lives of consumers, then all will become hollow empires, shaking before the quiet nods of modern consumers. So, when Canadians turn away, they are not simply rejecting a product. They are rejecting a consumer ideology. And if America does not listen to that, then tomorrow, not just Canada, but America itself will witness more silent withdrawals. Not because the world turns its back, but because America has strayed too far from what once made it lovable.